Hi babes, welcome to The Pleasure Portal, a podcast for women desiring to embody their fierce, wild, feminine magic, reclaim their deepest soul desires, and unleash the passion, pleasure, and fulfillment they know in their bones is their birthright. I'm your host, Kelsey Grant, a love, intimacy, and relationship educator and pleasure alchemist. I'm curious, has your pleasure ever been on the back burner? Have you ever felt like your pleasure doesn't matter? Have you experienced your feminine power being minimized, ignored, or suppressed? If so, this is the place for you. Because in this podcast, we're writing a whole new story together. We're a community of fierce femmes who are done with the binds of repression. We're the women who desire a pleasurable sex life, sacred connection with ourselves, and intimate partnership with another without having to give up or hide parts of who we are. We're the modern witches who, until now, have had to hide or suppress our sacred gifts. Together, we're unhooking from the binds that mute our greatest expression. We're dialing up that turn-on full tilt. We're creating right relationship with our emotions, our power, our enchantment alchemy, and our womb wisdom. Each episode, I'll bring to you a mix of pleasure alchemy, embodiment education, love, sex, and relationship insights, and ultimately an invitation home to your fierce feminine magic. We are reclaiming it all. Down and in we go. Hello, friends. Welcome to the new year. We did it. We made it. We are officially in 2021 today. And I thought that this would be a really great time to talk about what we need to release in order to rise. And so often on the new year, there's just so much freaking pressure to change everything about ourselves and everything about our lives. And like after the crazy fucking year we all have had, let's just take a pause. Let's be a little more gentle with ourselves. Let's not need to overhaul every single element of our life in day one. Because a lot of the time when we set New Year's resolutions, first of all, they're coming from a place of looking at ourselves through the lens of not enough. So if I resolve to change these things, then I will be more complete. I will be more lovable. I will be more choosable. And we often seek to resolve the things that we think are fundamentally wrong or flawed within ourselves. So if we start the year off from that energy, it can go sideways. It can go a little wobbly on us. And so I don't set resolutions. I'm not a fan of them at all, if you couldn't tell. I like to set intentions. I like to pick a word or a couple words that will, be the themes of my year. So far, ease, pleasure, and magnetism are the ones that have been swirling around. And those might keep swirling. They might change. And that's the thing when we get into like these very fixated places in our head of like, this is how it has to be for this year. And then we feel into it a couple weeks in, and we're like, not really grabbing me. It's not really, hooking me. It's not really, lighting me up. But I gave my word. These are my words for the year, so I guess I better stick with them. Or, the same with the resolutions. Like, oh, it's not actually really jiving with me. And like, ooh, maybe I did set those those resolutions from a place of, being harsh on myself and hard on myself and looking at all the ways that I'm not making the mark. And so we really want to give ourselves a little bit of space once we cross the threshold into the new year. Well, it can be a really powerful portal. It's not the only one. It's not like if you don't know exactly how you want your year to pan out from today onward, you're screwed. Because that's not true. You can take all the time that you need to vision out what you'd like to see happen, or what you'd like to commit to, or what you'd like to explore more of in 2021. You don't have to do it all today. So first things first, permission slip granted to let the process be a lot more spacious, a lot more pleasurable, just a lot more attuned to your actual system, to your actual experience. And no need to rush, no need to feel like you're behind or you're doing it wrong. None of that. We're not doing that in 2021 anymore. We're going to start things off, on a new foot. And we are going to take a look at what does need to be released in order for us to rise. This is a great inventory to start taking on, the first day of the new year, or the first couple days, or the first month, or the first couple months. And where we want to start to look is, what were the lessons, the growth, the areas that really impacted us this past year? And what are the things that we are celebrating, that we're proud of ourselves about, all of the wins that we can, focus on and explore and just amplify. And then after we have both of those two key areas, then we can start to vision out what we'd like to see in 2021. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of my process with it, a little bit of my reflection, just so that you have a bit of an example to base this off of. And then the invitation is to make it your own. So anything I offer here is always just an invitation. It's an invitation to try it on, see how it fits in your system, and then take the parts that really feel good, and then the parts that you're like, I don't know if that really fits for me. Well, then don't take it. It's pretty easy. You don't have to take what doesn't work for you. But I'm going to offer up, a little bit of my story, a little bit of my experience, the things that I am being called to release in order to rise. And I hope that that inspires you to give yourself the grace to take a look at, what am I ready to release? What am I ready to step into? And can I be honest with myself about all of that? So one of the main themes, like for so many of 2020, was loss and grief. My 2020 literally started off with a really big loss, a lot of grief. We lost my grandfather, and, it happened pretty fast. He kind of got sick at the beginning of January, and it was not looking good by the end of January. Then there was like that moment where he got a little better, things were looking a little up, but intuitively I felt like, it's coming. It's coming really fast, and it's coming really soon. And so I ended up having the opportunity to fly home and go and visit my grandfather before he passed away. And it was such a beautiful experience. It was heartbreaking. It was heart-wrenching. I got to sit with him in his last few days and just let him know the impact that his life had had on mine. And it's choking me up a little bit because he was such a pillar for our family and for me. And he was such an embodiment of grace and generosity. And he didn't say a lot, but his energy was so rooted and so anchored. And, there was this energy of creativity that I always was just so enamored with when it came to my grandfather, because he loved to make inventions. He loved to just tinker around in his shop and make all sorts of wild, inventions for all of us to use, or just for him to use. And that really gave me permission to be a creative in my own way. Now, my creativity is more artistic. It's, very much a part of my business here. Everything I do is an act of creation and creativity. And I really got to see that growing up. I got to watch him make all of these wild inventions that didn't make sense to anybody else, but they made sense to him, and he did not give a flying fuck if you approved of him or not. He was still making the things he wanted to make and doing the things that he wanted to do. And for me, getting to see that modeled my entire life was something that was so special. And then to be able to reflect that back to him on the last few days of his life here on earth was something so sacred. And, pouring into him all of the things that I really needed him to know about who he was to me. All of the things that get said in a eulogy, and I know I talked about this in a previous episode, but all of the things that we say in a eulogy to celebrate someone's life, I wanted to make sure that he heard those things from my mouth before he left his body. And I've never had the opportunity to sit with someone on their deathbed and be in that tenderness and be in that vulnerability. And I could feel the words getting stopped in my throat. And, it was such a rite of passage for me to be able to move those words up and out and be holding his hand while I was speaking these things, and to make sure that he was so wrapped in love, so wrapped in honor, so wrapped in respect as he kind of made his transition in the final days. And of course, after all of that happened, there was so much grief that needed to move through. And I am very grateful for all of the work and the support that I've had throughout this last decade to be able to sit with that grief, to be able to let it move through me without needing to censor it or change it or alter it, but just let it be there, let it move through. And it always did. It never, took me out. It didn't last forever. Like, my philosophy with grief and with crying is this: like, at some point there's going to be an end to it. You're either going to exhaust yourself from crying, or you're going to become so dehydrated that your body literally cannot produce any more tears, and you will have a pocket of reprieve. There will be those moments where you kind of come to life again, and you're like, ooh, there's some spaciousness here, and then the density might come back, and we got to move it through again. And so the beginning of 2020 was very much the alchemical moving of grief and honoring of grief and honoring of love, because the thing is, with grief, you don't grieve something if there hasn't been deep and true love that has, been anchored there first. Like, if we don't give a shit about someone or something, losing it makes no difference to us. We're like, okay, moving on. But when we have a strong bond, connection, anchored in love, when that is lost, you will feel grief. And to me, having that awareness of, great grief means that great love once existed here, and that this is just the next transition of love. This is the next phase of love. This is the next deepening and enriching of that love. So that when someone moves from this physical plane to another plane of existence, we can honor that transition. We don't have to, block ourselves off from having that experience or prevent it from moving us through the experience, because we understand that the heart of it is love. The heart of it is, there's so much love here that maybe didn't get to be expressed. And I also think that's a big part about grief and why it can, hit us so deeply, is because a lot of the time there's so much that we haven't expressed, that we've held back because we we're being human and we're like, oh, I don't want to seem like that person. Or I don't want to be vulnerable and really, really share who this person is to me. And so we hold in our love. And the more we hold in our love, the more we will be terrified of our grief. Because the grief is like, well, I guess the love is going to come through one way or another. And so I'm coming to town and I'm moving through your system. And so we know that on some level, which is why if we don't have a relationship to the expression of our love that is really vocal, really healthy, really expressive, when we lose that love or we lose the person to which the love is attached, we can have this fear of grieving that comes up. Very normal. And so one of the ways that we can start creating a more harmonious relationship with grief, and I know that sounds a little bit weird, but the one way we can do that is by making a choice every single day to express the love in our heart with zero abandon, zero filter, just a full heart open expression. Tell people who they are to you. Tell them what they mean to you. And at first they might think it's weird. And it probably will be because you're changing the dynamic there. And do it anyway. Express that love anyway. It's in you. Love is in you to give. Love is in you to honor and to express and share. And we often take for granted that people know how we feel about them. But they don't know how we feel about them unless we tell them how we actually feel about them. Otherwise, we're just expecting our relationships to exist in this zone of assumption making, of, well, I'm just going to assume that you know that I love you and that you know what I love you most for. And that is a way that we really rip ourselves off, and we also rip each other off of having these profound, incredible connections with each other. And also, we start to generate this more, I don't want to call it dysfunctional relationship with grief, but definitely a tense relationship with grief because we're not allowing the expression of our heart. So beginning 2020 with this massive grief portal and the opportunity to express the love that was in my heart and do it in a way that my grandfather would have been proud, because he had that attitude of like, I'm doing what I want. I don't care if it makes me look silly or if you judge me for it. And so I channeled some of that energy and I brought it up. And I shared everything that I could possibly think to share and feel to share with my grandfather before he passed on. And then, I ended up doing the eulogy at his funeral, which was by far the hardest thing I have ever had to do. I am a writer. I am a speaker. I speak for a living, and I speak vulnerably for a living. And writing that eulogy was like the final love letter. And what was so magical about it was everything that was written in the eulogy I had said or had been communicated to him before he passed away. So there was nothing in there that he did not hear on some level before he passed on, which is really, really special. And then, of course, coming out of that grief portal and that initiation, I come back home and we are in quarantine. The world is shifted real fast. And so being in this grief portal and then coming into quarantine was, in ways it was shocking, in ways it was tough, but in other ways it was a blessing, because for me, when I grieve, I need a lot of space. I need a lot of alone time to be able to move that energy. And, I got it in quarantine. And in that time of quarantine, there were things that started to surface because likely, with the open-heartedness of the expression of my love and the expression of my grief and doing one of the hardest things I've ever done in my entire life, all of a sudden things started churning about my relationship. And it's no surprise to anyone that we were in a over-functioning, under-functioning dynamic. We talked about it quite a bit. We had a podcast together where we literally talked about this for a month as one of the themes that we talked about, and we shared, the dynamics in our relationship. And coming back from everything that I had just gone through and experienced, and now having to sit by myself in the experience of, okay, you can't not look at this anymore. And you have to really get honest with yourself about what is true and alive in you. And this is the tricky part about relationships, because we can have two conflicting truths happening at the same time. One of those truths was that I love him so deeply and so dearly, and I think the world of him. The other truth was that something was fundamentally not working in the relationship. And I could not envision a life where we were caught in that over-functioning, under-functioning bind. My life force energy was being sucked as a result of that pattern. Not as a result of him, but as a result of that pattern that we were both co-creating. And so having to sit with the, density of that, with the seriousness of that, and considering what are we going to do? So the first step was, okay, maybe we should stop, working together, because, that doesn't really give us a lot of space to be intimate and to be in a more playful relational space when we're working together. And so let's remove that off of the table for the time being. Let's press pause on that. And let's just be in relationship with each other and see how that goes. And, as you all know, that led to us separating. And it just became very, very clear that we weren't going to get out of that over-functioning, under-functioning bind without breaking the relational container, without severing the pattern entirely, which meant separating. And the original intention was to separate for 6 months and work on ourselves and walk our individual healing paths, and then come back together in the new year and essentially redesign a new relationship together. And, I think that the universe has a hilarious sense of humor sometimes, because we can plan these things out and we can say, okay, this is our intention. This is what we're committed to. Yes, we're both on the same page here. And then the universe is like, nice try. Nice try trying to micromanage me and trying to control the uncontrollable, which, for the record, is my MO. As an overfunctioner, my MO is to go into control and to try and control everything, including a separation, including how that's going to go. And, it's my way or the highway sort of energy. And the universe was like, no, we got to school you in this, because you can't keep trying to control and hold the reins and also call in the thing that you want, and also do the deep cellular healing that is related to these patterns. And so it was October that we decided to officially end the separation and, go our separate ways. And, that was really, really painful and really, really difficult. There are some things that have been stirred up around my betrayal wound and, competition wounds with other women. And it was fucking gnarly, so gnarly internally. I'm not saying gnarly dramatic between the two of us. I mean, the experience inside my body was I was being re-traumatized. I was going through all of these things that I was trying to avoid by controlling everything. And, that trauma spiral is very painful to be in, of course. But for me, it's always such a huge wake-up call to what I'm actually doing, because so much of our behavior and our patterns are automatic and we're not consciously thinking about them. Even if we are in this world of personal development and relational development and we're working on ourselves constantly, there's just so many things that go into being human that we're not consciously thinking about every single thing we're doing every day. Like, you're not consciously directing your body to digest your food, or to move your arms, or to command your legs to walk, or whatever your experience is in your body. Like, we are not consciously directing that. It's automatic. There's so much of our behavior that's automatic. And when it comes to our relational patterns, sometimes those creep in on us. And there's just other layers to explore. Like, when I went through this really big rupture of a relationship 4 years ago, which I'm sure I'll talk about more at some point when it feels safe in my body to do so. But when I went through that, one of the most challenging parts was that I was totally stuck in survival. And I wasn't really tuned into the nuance of my side of the pattern. I didn't see how I had adopted this really controlling way of being as a way to prevent myself from ever feeling the depth of the pain that I felt in that relationship rupture. And, when all of this unraveled with Jamie, I started to be able to connect those dots, because, our relationship overall was not a tumultuous one. It wasn't a, toxic relationship. It just, we found ourselves in these patterns of overfunctioning and underfunctioning that we just couldn't get out of by staying together. And by separating, I know that he's been walking his own path of healing, and he's had some really powerful insights and reclamations on his end. And it allowed me to also do the same, to see how much of that control has really been operating, and, to see what it takes to trigger that to come out into the open was really, really valuable information for me. And to see what I do when it does get triggered, because there has been so much healing that's happened in the last 4 years since that tumultuous, emotionally abusive relationship. And what that means is now when I go through a rupture, there is a little bit more space to observe myself inside of the spiral. I have awareness that, something is off, and, something is not quite right here. And I get to go on this exploration to figure out what that is. And what I kept meeting was this desire to control, the desire to track every movement that Jamie was making, or the impulse to, stay connected, and as a way to tether some certainty and tether some control, and to not have to feel so uncomfortable, not being able to control someone else's behavior or someone else's feelings, or the direction that their life is meant to go, and really having to surrender and trust and open again. And that's, been a real challenging, part of this year as well. And what that ultimately led me to, though, was the reclamation of my pleasure. Because when we are in a space of controlling other people, our life, our relationships, there isn't a lot of pleasure happening there. There's not a lot of embodiment happening there either, because control is very heady. We are in our head trying to micromanage everything, which means we are disconnected from the body and the sensations and the cues that are happening in the body. And so, going through that big rupture in the fall, then really started to bring this pleasure piece back on my radar. And, there have been many pockets of my life where I have been living the embodiment of my pleasure. And what I started to piece together was that in the peak of me being in my magic, the peak of me being in my pleasure, in my embodiment, I had attracted someone who really took advantage of that and did a lot of harm. And like I said, there are elements to that relationship that are still being processed and felt into and explored because it was so traumatizing. And there was emotional abuse that happened. And, it was a gnarly initiation. I'll say that. And what I started to see was like when I met him in 2012, I was in my magic. I was in my pleasure. I was radiating that richness, that vitality. And it led me into a relationship where I experienced a lot of harm, a lot of pain, a lot of betrayal. And so the unconscious association that had been made that I wasn't totally aware of was, it was pleasure's fault that you got yourself into that mess. So if you shut down the part of you that makes you most luminous, it will prevent those types of people who are going to prey on that energy. And all of that had been hiding in my shadow. I was not consciously aware that that was the dynamic that was at play. But through the portal of everything that unraveled in 2020 with my grandfather and then quarantine and then with Jamie, it helped bring that to the surface. It helped bring it up so that I could connect the dots. And I could also remind myself and remind those parts of my psyche, those parts of my body, those parts of my inner child that it wasn't pleasure that caused that shitstorm. There was, responsibility on his end, for the ways in which he behaved. But then there were things about my discernment that I hadn't fully owned. And my intuition had gone off about this guy about a month and a half into dating him, and I ignored it. I made justifications and excuses. I'm like, he is so hot. The sex is incredible. I will override this little niggly feeling that I've got. And, I got schooled in that relationship in a really big way. And so when it kind of came up again this fall that, pleasure is the portal. Pleasure is the portal to the on-purpose relationship that you are desiring, where you're fully met with someone who is really, really clear about who he is, what he's doing in the world, and how much he loves you. Just as much as I am clear about who I am and what I give to the world, and so clear on how much I love and adore him. So it's this more balanced dynamic, because my history in some of my more serious relationships is to pick people who it's not actually a balanced match. It's not actually both people going 2 feet in. It's more the ambiguity of them not being sure about me, and then me hustling for my worth, being like, let me prove it to you. Let me show you how valuable I am. Let me show you how helpful I am. Let me help build you up so that you can launch into the world. But the thing is, when you're a launch pad, you launch someone off into the world, and just like, when kids fly the nest, they might not be flying with you. they might be flying in a whole new direction with a whole new flock of birds. And that's the history and also the experience, and something that I see a lot in my clients as well, which not shocking that there would be parallels there. But this idea of like, oh, you meet someone, they don't know who they are. And so you nurture that space for them to really figure it out. Not that you're doing it for them, but you nurture the space so that they can figure it out. And then once they do, they're like, okay, I'm ready to fly. I'm ready to launch into the world. Bye. See you later. And then you're left brokenhearted and, crying on the floor, like that song from the 90s. It's not a pleasurable experience. Not being met has you be, in this constant state of anxiety. Like, is this person actually going to choose me today, or is this the day that they leave? And not that there's ever really any guarantees in love, and at any point, any person does have the free will to leave. But it's a little bit different when you have two people who've gone 2 feet in, two people that really choose each other. And I've had those types of relationships where I'm 2 feet in, they're 2 feet in, and there's just no drama. And, there's clearly, a big karmic lesson in there for me of like what excitement are you deriving from this kind of push-pull? And can you generate that type of excitement in your life so that you don't have to use your relationships to get that need for excitement met in a really off-purpose way, a way that causes you harm and a way that causes them harm too, because no one likes to be the person that hurts someone. No one likes to be the person who betrays someone, although maybe there are a handful of those people on the planet who legitimately enjoy it. But for the most part, the majority of people who have ever betrayed someone or lied or hurt someone, they're not doing it because they get some sick enjoyment out of it. It's just part of, the dynamic. This is part of our wounds at play. And we don't like being the person that causes someone to hurt, especially if we have truly loved them. And so it was such a big wake-up call for me to start generating my relationship to myself and my life in a way that was rooted in pleasure again, and reclaiming that back after having disowned it for so long. Because, like I said, I experienced something really traumatic, and my mind had made the association that it was pleasure's fault. It was my radiance fault. It was the magic that I was holding in my body, and the way in which I was going through life feeling totally turned on all the time. Like every area of my life I felt turned on in, and I was lit up by. Like there was no area of my life that was dysfunctioning at that point in time. And so to kind of go through the experience and then be so broken and hurt after, experiencing a really, really challenging relationship, it makes sense why we might hold these pieces back. And so this is why it's such an important thing to take some time at the beginning of the new year to explore, what do we need to release in order to rise? For me, it's that release of needing to control, the release of the codependent hooks of like constantly tracking someone and trying to control their experience so that I feel safe, and trying to control every aspect of my life so that it's predictable and I know it's happening so that I feel stable and anchored. And releasing all of that material so that I have more space to dance in the magic. I have more availability to pleasure in my body. And now that I have this beautiful piece of discernment, relational discernment, and I have been able to meet myself in these really deep and vulnerable places, dating doesn't feel like this really scary thing. It doesn't feel like this really, negative thing. It actually feels like an opening. It feels like an exploration, like I trust myself. And that trust in myself is a byproduct of doing the more gnarly work of let's look at these patterns. Let's look at the parts of my life that really are not working for me. And why are they not working? And what would have them work a little bit better? What is the antidote here? What is the elixir that my heart and my body and my soul is longing for? What is it? And then from there, knowing where we're coming from and what we desire, then we can make a plan to start to change our behavior, change our patterns, change just the way that we're showing up for ourselves, first and foremost. And when we start to change the way that we show up for ourselves, all of a sudden we start attracting new results. We start experiencing new results. And, when we go into those stickier places of, looking at the trauma spirals or looking at, this is the behavior that I'm not so proud of. I'm not proud, of being the person who is like constantly like running in my head. Like, what is he doing? Who is he with? Who is he talking to? What's the situation? Trying to figure it out. Like, that's not something I'm proud of doing. But I also understand that there's a good reason why that happens, because when we track back into our history, we can see that there are moments in either our childhood, our adolescence, our young adulthood, or maybe in our adulthood where we have had the rug pulled out, where we didn't see something coming at the time. And yes, looking back, our vision is 2020. We can we can see things a little bit more clear. We can piece them together. But in the moment, we don't always see it. And that's okay. That's very human. We're not trying to get you to the point where you can see every little thing before it happens and you never experience pain or discomfort again, because you're gonna. And it's going to be exhausting to try and prevent any of that from happening. But what we want to do is to build up our relationship to self, our relationship to our emotions, our relationship to our wounds and our tender spots, so that when they do get triggered, if they do get triggered, we're able to hold them with reverence. We can hold these parts of us with so much love and respect and honor. We don't need to outrun ourselves. We don't need to lock them away. We can sit with those parts, maybe have a cup of tea with them and say, hey, I see you. It's okay. Like, I understand why you're here. I understand why you want to control, why you're looking for certainty. And while that's an important thing, like certainty is important, we need to redirect it to, what am I certain about myself? Like, what am I certain about when it comes to, how I show up, what I'm feeling right now? Because once we move that pivot from trying to seek certainty from tracking someone or obsessing about someone and what they're doing and trying to control and manipulate it, we can, use all of that creative energy to generate certainty for ourselves. So this is where we get into some of the somatics, which I'm so grateful. This was a big year for me in terms of somatic therapy. And I did a training at the start of the year, and then I've been working with a somatic therapist for the second half of 2020. And, one of the big things is when we're, grasping for certainty by, doing these things like tracking someone or obsessing about what they're doing or who they're with. What we can do is start to dial in, what am I certain of in this now moment? What am I certain about? Well, I'm certain that my butt is sitting on a cushion on the floor of my bedroom, and I am looking out the window, and the sky is gray. I can see the reflection of the light in the window. I can see the rain that's coming down. I can't hear the birds anymore, so maybe they've gone to sleep for the night. And I'm certain that I feel the crystal that I'm holding in my right hand right now. I can feel the sensation, the compression on my ears from my headphones. I can feel that my left foot is getting a little tingly, starting to fall asleep. I can feel the sharpness of the tips of my nails. So there are lots of things in this now present moment that you can be certain of. And once you start to anchor to what can you be certain of in this moment? Is it a feeling that you're feeling emotionally? Is it a sensation that you're experiencing in your body? Is it something that you notice with any of your senses in the environment that you're in? And when we start to orient ourselves in the present moment, that need to seek certainty outside of ourselves, to seek certainty by tracking someone else or, stalking their social media or whatever it is that we do, we will feel the impulse shift around that. It might not shift immediately, but the charge around it won't feel so intense that you don't really have control over your behavior. Instead, you might feel the impulse, and then maybe we talk to the impulse. Okay, impulse, what do you want to do? Okay, I want to go and stalk their social media and see who they're following and what they're liking and what they're interacting and what they're saying. Okay, that's valid. It's valid that you want to do that. And is that going to make you feel better? And this is where the magic starts to happen, friends. Because the second we just take a moment to be with ourselves, to not make the impulse wrong, because the impulse isn't wrong. It's just an impulse. It's a way that you and your inner child and your body are trying to find certainty in an experience that feels really chaotic. And that's okay. It's so okay. And so when we just take a moment to talk to the impulse, what do you want to do? Okay, tell me what do you want to do? And all right, that makes sense. It makes sense that you want to do that. All right. And then we ask the question, would that make me feel better? Or how is that going to make me feel long term? So in the short term, it might give us this little pop of relief. But then the aftermath of that, we might go into a shame spiral, or we might see something that we didn't really want to see, and that, kind of breaks our fantasy of the person, or, just doesn't make us feel good. And so we can take a moment to say, okay, is that really going to feel good 5 minutes after you do it? Is that really going to feel good an hour after you do it? And from there, we can start to really make different choices, and choices that empower us in the moment. So if we come to the realization that, in all honesty, it probably is going to make me feel like shit, because it might kick up my comparison, it might kick up my shame, it might kick up my guilt, it might kick up all my insecurities. And so, maybe that isn't the option that would really lead me to feeling the best overall. And so when we have that realization, then we can ask ourselves, okay, great. Now that we know that, what would feel nourishing? What would feel helpful? What would feel good? And maybe we get up and we move our body. We put on some music. I'm obsessed with Justin Bieber. Anyone who knows me knows that. So when I'm really feeling sticky, I'll put on some Justin Bieber, move around. Or one of my favorite teachers for embodiment, India, she's going to be on the podcast probably this spring. We're recording soon. And she makes the most incredible playlists for our dance classes. And so sometimes I'll just pop one of those on and just move in my body. Other times I might choose a self-pleasure practice. I'm I think I just need to have an orgasm and then I'll feel better. And it, that's never failed me. And I use my pleasure wands, my crystal wands. I really like the glass wands because I get to tune in to the sensation in my body. It allows me to remain anchored and present in my body. Other times, maybe I'll go for a walk, Or maybe I just need to drink some water or eat some food because I'm hungry. And when those needs aren't being addressed, like I'm more likely to go into those impulsive behaviors of, trying to control. And so there are many ways that we can start learning the roadmap of our own body, our own system, our own psyche by paying attention to what we do impulsively and then just take inventory. Like, is that really serving me? And sometimes, you know what? The answer will be yes. And you will, hop on social media and spend hours going down the rabbit hole of what you can find. And that will serve a purpose too. It really will. Because it'll get to the point where it feels so unbearably uncomfortable and gross in your body. And at that point, that's when you'll start to explore a different way of meeting yourself and meeting your needs and really honoring what it is that you need to thrive. So when we do a lot of that exploration in the moment, what really helps to give us a little bit of buffering is to take inventory on the things that happened in the year that you're really proud of, that you're really celebrating, and all of the wins. And I would highly recommend making this a normal practice for yourself. So at the end of the day, write down 5 wins. Write down 1 win. You don't even have to write it down. Just think about it. Make it a practice in your friend circles to brag to each other, to share the things that you're celebrating. Because we have a negativity bias as human beings, so we're naturally going to lean in the direction of focusing on what doesn't work, what's wrong, the ways in which we're not measuring up, and bond over that. And that can really trip us up in all sorts of ways. That's a whole other probably series in and of itself. But when we have a baseline of positivity, joy, celebration, not only does that make the quality of our relationships so much better, but it also helps you to connect in a much more fierce and direct way to your intuition, meaning all of those initial signs or inklings that you might get that are your radar going off, we can feel that and we can understand what it's trying to communicate. And it's much easier to discern whether it's your intuition or your ego masquerading as your intuition when you have a storehouse of positivity, a storehouse of celebration, this muscle of being proud of yourself and feeling safe to express the things that you're proud of to the people that matter most to you. And this can, take a little bit of restructuring in our social circles to get our friends and family on board with communicating this way. But if there's one thing that we explore in 2021 is increasing the quality of our current relationships. So it's not a matter of, clearing them all out and then starting again. Like, no, we can upgrade the current relationships that we have. And we can do that by having, asking higher quality questions and having dialogue and discourse with each other that's rooted in celebration, cheering each other on, sharing wins, bragging about the things you're proud of. And when we really drop in and we share vulnerability, like, this is something I'm proud of myself for, it's very different than like blowing smoke up your own ass and saying like, ooh, look how good I am. I'm so much better than everybody else. We're not saying that you're better than everybody else by owning your wins. And it's actually in the ownership of your wins that it prevents you from going in that egotistical, it's self-inflated direction of like, oh, I'm so much better than everybody else, which is just a posture, which is just, a grandiose self-inflation to try and hide the fact that we don't actually think very highly of ourselves, that our self-worth is actually in the toilet. But again, that's another rant for another day. So the invitation here is to take some time to celebrate the things that you're proud of. I'm proud of initiating a ending of a relationship that wasn't serving either of us in the current context that it was. I am proud of starting this podcast because I love podcasting. And I'm also proud of waiting, because I really could have overfunctioned and pushed myself to do this in the summer as a way to avoid feeling my feelings. But I didn't. I waited until I had moved through a lot of that material and was feeling like this was a generous offering. I'm also really proud of myself for not plugging in to a new person as a way to distract myself and ward off those feelings, because that is, something that I have done in the past. So this is not me shaming you or anybody who has done that, because I'm with you. I have so done that before. I used to be the queen of that. Like, oh, I'm broken up. Next day, new partner. Wasn't a lot of vetting happening at those points in time. And so I understand, again, why the impulse to do that is there. But I'm really proud that I sat in it, and I instead generated a incredible coven of sisters. I've been dreaming of generating a coven for the last decade, and it's taken a decade to call in the right people to make that magic happen. And it all kind of came together this summer, which is so special. So those are like the main things. And I know that there's more, but I want to be mindful of time here to celebrate. And so the invitation is for you to also celebrate yourself. And then from there, we can move into what is our vision for 2021? And what do we want to bring forward? What are we ready to let go of? And what do we want more of? And I am so excited to have an offering to support you through that. So I'm going to be offering, maybe I'll do it every year. I don't know. We'll see. I'm doing it this year, and that's what matters. And it's a 4-week coaching program. It's all about pleasure mapping so that you can live a turned on 2021. I want you to feel so turned on in every single area of your life, so lit up, so inspired, so on purpose in every single area of your life, so that more pleasure can permeate all of the major areas that are important to you. So we're going to do a 4-week process. We're going to go in, we're going to explore every single major area of your life, take some inventory on that, and we're going to do some celebrating, and we are going to be doing some visioning, and I'm going to be giving you the 4 pillars to leading a pleasurable life so that we can anchor those into your day-to-day embodiment. And then we'll also finish the program with a full vision of every single area of your life that's important to you and the actionables that you are actually committed to taking in those areas, and really set yourself up for success by bringing in some of the pleasure, the magic, the fun, the play. Like, this is not a hard program. I'm done with that. For 2021, 2021 is ease. It's pleasure. It's everything that feels good. If it feels good, do it. I mean, that's been my motto for years, but it's coming back. It's making a comeback this year. So it feels good, do it. So we're going to be having a lot of fun in that visioning process. And there's going to be a lot of play and a lot of excitement, a lot of joy, so that we can anchor something new in for this year ahead. So if that is something that is calling to you, and you want to take the next couple of weeks to really digest, what you've been through in 2020, then this program is probably right for you. And I'm going to be issuing a early bird promo code so that you can get $25 off before we launch and open the doors on January 4th. So if you are hearing this before January 4th and you are clear, you want to register for the 4-week program, it's $197 and then, minus your $25, just to hop into that program with a bunch of more like-minded people so that we can also generate some community, have some fun, and really vision out your 2021 to be in accordance to what is pleasurable to you and what allows you to feel the most turned on, the most anchored in your power, and the most expansive experience of your heart in all of those areas that matter most to you. So if that's your jam, hit me up. Come over to Instagram, shoot me a DM. You can send me an email at rsl@kelseygrant.com and let me know why 2021 is the year of pleasure visioning for you. And I will hook you up with the promo code. And we are going to kick that program off in the middle of January. I don't have my calendar with me, so I can't even tell you what day it's going to be. It'll be in the show notes. But it's definitely the middle of January, and we're going to have weekly calls and some curriculum. It's going to be great. So if that's your jam, awesome, hit me up. And if not, walk yourself through the process that I outlined here today that will serve you so well for the year to come. And I'm really excited to be, entering in this new year, this new energy with all of you. And I'm so grateful for everyone who is listening and for everyone in this community. I love you all so very much. And here is to an extraordinary 2021. We'll talk soon, friends. Bye.